This is not the worst hack job I've ever done, but it's probably tied for first. Welcome back to Made by J&D. I have mounted the steering box to the steering box bracket. Bracket's mounted solid to the frame. I have the steering column vertically aligned with the input stub here to the steering box. The steering column itself is too long, plus it is too steeply slanted. I need to tilt it back a bit. I'm going to cut out a part of the firewall here. Right now, just this little bit of flange. And if I need to go further, I will. And at the same time, that's going to make the steering column at about the right angle for driving and everything else. And to make this, it's a tilt steering wheel. It just lines up, I think, better that way. The challenge is I need to make the steering column shorter, and at the same time I need to somehow either modify the steering box length that I have or find something else. I've looked online, and there is a company that specializes in making steering components, and they have off the shelf a U-joint. On one side it's splined, the other side it's got what they call a double D, so it's just the input shaft here would be two flats and ground onto it. Now the splined end is a 3/4 inch by 36 spline. I've counted these splines on the stub here on the steering box. That's 36 splines, but it's not 0.75 inches for 3/4 inch. It's 0.8. I got to find out if that's really what they mean by 0.75, or I don't know. On this end, there's splines on this end as well, on the end of the steering column, but they're like 1 inch. So that would have to be modified in any case. The other limitation on doing that is it is only good for a 36-degree bend. It can only turn a 36-degree corner. That's 36 degrees. And yeah, it's already too steep. There's no way I'd get that to work. If I used an aftermarket one, it would have to be a double U-joint. Or I can just continue and try to modify what I have, because I know it all works. It all fits together, other than being too long. Before I start tearing apart the steering column and finding out how to shorten it, I really need to make this link as short as I can, or at least determine if I can use this or have to purchase something. Anyways, I can cut most of this off, but this has still got the coating, so this was all one thing. Then they machined all the rest of this off, and you can see some of that blue is still in there, so that was all one size at one point. But I can't really have this right in there. It's an interference. I can't get all the angle I need. It's going to be something like that rather than this. It's a couple of degrees. So it doesn't do me any good to just cut all of this off. I still wouldn't be able to get it to bend. So I'm thinking I'll cut most of it off, maybe to about here. That'll leave about 1.5 inches or so, and that's what I need this to be cut down. That should get me quite a bit of length. Now to keep them engaged, I probably shouldn't have to do anything else. If it gets to be a problem, I can drill through it and put a pin in it or something. But for now, I'm just going to cut this off, leave about 1/2 inch of this, and then I'll see how much of this that leaves from here to here, roughly 1.5 inches, say. Give that a bit of a cleanup in my solvent tank. I'll try it out. It's all cleaned up. This still has a nice range of movement. And I really can't make it much shorter than that. it might be important to have this continue moving like this. I don't think there's going to be any problem with strength. At the end of the day, I've taken out 4.5 inches or so, just under, and that'll be my link, unless somebody can convince me that there's a better way. I was taking a look at this, wondering how it came apart. There's a nut holding this in. It's probably a press fit, and that nut's held in place by a split pin. Anyways, that's information for later. This top part unbolts. So this is a bearing all by itself. If I look here, the one thing that might be a problem is this allowed for almost no slop. If I tried to bend this. This has some slop now. Don't know if it's a problem. There's also a boot that goes over this. I have to figure out how to put that on there. Shouldn't be a problem. I think it just clamps onto the outside of this and the outside of this. That'll keep the grease in and the dirt out. So what now? I'll put this back onto the steering box, put the steering column back in, and I'll find out where this lines up with the steering column as it is, and see how much I have to cut out to make this work. I'm going to try to be clever and use a hole saw for this. All we have to do is get a pilot hole going, and that should work. Yeah, let's try that. Let's try a small hole first. That'll do. That's where the bottom of the column needs to go. This shifting lever down here, that's attached to the, can't get it out of there. That goes to the shift cable that was shifting the transmission. It's going to have to be above this. Well, that's going to be hard to cope with. But it has to be done. I don't know how else to do that. Unless I move the shifting down in the column, or off the column onto somewhere over there, which I really don't want to do. There's one less complication if I do that, though. Well, that's consideration. We'll work this out. For now, I just need to see if I can even shorten this column that far. My goodness, that's a long ways. Right about here. It's where the bottom of the shaft has got to go. The housing's going to have to be shortened the same amount, I guess. Oof. That's the longest it can be. Online, 2 or 3 guys have done really good tear down and reassembly of these steering columns. So I'm not going to try to repeat that here. I wouldn't be good at it. They're very detailed. They had good shots. I'll just continue from here and just start taking it apart the way they did. Now, they didn't start down at the bottom. They started at the top and taking the wheel off and such. I just wanted to show you here how these switches come off. There's this terminal block here. This is a switch that goes to the ignition key, and this is a switch that works from the shift lever. This terminal block has everything to do with, I think these are horn button, turn signals, that sort of thing. And I believe this one comes to the, right here, or here, right there. There's a button on the end of this, and that engages your cruise control. And I think that's where this comes from. I don't know, I'll find that out in a minute. I've already taken the screws out. This here just comes off. This is engaged with a thing here. Goes into a slot in the steering column, and that makes and breaks reversing lights and whatever else switches go on. And there's the outer column, and then there's an inner sleeve that moves, and that's what works this switch. It's got a slot in it. This one here, the ignition switch, has got a rod here, and it just pokes right through. There's a hole right there, and when you move it, it makes or breaks these connections here. This little terminal block just pushes off, and it's held on by a bracket. Can't take that off. I think I'm also going to take this off at this point because it has to come off at some time. But it really is just in the way for me here, and no reason to leave it on, so I'll take that off. There's a plastic sleeve here they said be careful of, because it's just held on by friction on some square nuts here. I believe the instructions also said at some point, okay, be careful of that. Phillips head screwdriver will take out this emergency lights, emergency flashers. I think that's what they said it was. Funny place to put it, but then this was 1976, so they didn't do them like they do now. Okay, the next thing is taking off the horn button. That's right here. Good luck. How does that come off? I tried to pry around the outside of this, which I think is actually aluminum, painted aluminum. And the button, there was no way to get it in, but then I noticed that this button, and then there's another plastic piece, and then that slots into this outer bezel. Well, this plastic thing looks like it comes out. So, what's behind here? Okay, oh, the horn button's all self-contained. Aha! I was trying to pry on this. Well, let's bolt it in. That's actually part of the steering wheel, I guess. Get some Allen keys and see if I can. Oh, it's been got one of those crimp connectors on it. Anyways, I'll get some Allen keys and take that out. I don't know if these are metric or imperial, so this is a metric set. We'll try them first. Oh, they're metric. Okay. Pretty loose. The steering wheel should just come off, I guess. That's just a keeper, some kind of spring keeper there. I have to block this up because right now I can't work on it. I took a few minutes and made this thing out of some scrap bits of wood. And that should work okay. So I'll take the pins out here, or take this keeper out. There we go, perfect. All right, and then a nut. As I mentioned in an earlier video, this is the only other instance, other than tie rod ends, that I have found 11/16 to be used. Now here's where things get tricky. I'm not going to try to do this here on this camera because there's no way I can get the detail that I've seen on the other videos. Plus I'll probably do it wrong. So I will just put links to those in the description. That wasn't any fun at all. The instructions that I reviewed were for a different model or year or something. But some of it was similar, other parts were not. I did review one video where he's rebuilding this joint here. Well, I don't need to redo that, happily. The problem laid in how to get this part off. That's the gear selector there. This part here holds the key. This is slotted onto this. And what I could not figure out was, because this wire was all through this inside, this part was captive, everything is being held in by that. And I could just see a couple of these little kind of clips right there. And they actually hook up right here. And you got to push down on both of these with a screwdriver at the same time. You push them down on these little parts here are coming disengaged. These parts here are coming disengaged from the inside of this casting. And yeah, until I figured that out, it wasn't coming apart. I was trying to take this pin out, slider pin. It wasn't coming out at all. I didn't want to break it, so it had to be something else. So how much do I need to cut out of this column? This is a mark I made. That's the top, or where this bottom of this splined shaft, that's where it's got to wind up. And that is 7 5/8 inches. This is a round bit of metal with 2 flats, double D I think they call it. A couple of brass pins here and here. I think those are shear pins. This is made to collapsible, so in a collision I guess it collapses. Easy enough. I'll just cut that, slide that in 7 5/8 inches. Easy. That takes care of the splined shaft. Now there are lots of little things here. I know for sure that this section has to move up in its entirety. These clips have to be here because they hold on a switch. This slot's got to be there because it's got this switch on it. Somewhere between here and here, or a combination of those two, I have to find 7 5/8 inches and then cut it out. Taking the steering column apart, I have to get around 7 1/2, 8 inches cut off of it, based on what, putting this right up against the firewall there, and that's where that has to be, the bottom of it would be here. That's where I had to cut it. Well, I started noticing then that this is nearly straight up and down. And this one's at a very sharp angle. Well, this can't work like this. It has to be out here. I have to divide 45 degrees. It's roughly 45 degrees. I have to divide that in half for this to work. Because this is only good for 35. I don't know what this is good for. But this is too steep. So I have to cut another, I don't know, couple of inches off of that maybe. Geez. Steering column's got to be 10 inches shorter, or 11 even. I don't know where I'm going to get that. I would, I'd left some room here in front, about 2 inches. I never considered where the pitman arm is going to wind up. If I turn that all the way, the other way, it turns out that this is hitting the front of the truck. That pitman arm hits on the inside. So if anything, I have this steering box too far forward already. Good grief. This is really putting my ingenuity to the test. I can take 10 inches out of this, or 10 1/2, maybe, straight out of this. It's not a problem. This one I can't really do much, although I can get all 10 inches straight just by cutting this or pushing it in or whatever. Doing some little plug welds and put that back together. But that, I have to worry about this slot and how it lines up with this switch. And there's the slot, lines up in this slot. The hard part, by far, is getting 10 inches about out of the steering column. The things that change, this holds a bearing on the bottom, and this has the slot. There is another bolting surface here to hold this ignition switch, the little wire that comes from the ignition switch to operate it. It's a slider. And then this rod. Okay, I'm going to have to take out this much here. That's roughly, I think I measured, it's about 3 inches. Take out a bit more here. That's 4 1/2 inches. that is going to interfere with where this lines up. So this will be the last piece to cut because this slot's got to line up in this slot. And now to get the rest of that, because 3 and 4.5, 7.5, I need another 2.5 minimum. I'm getting 3 out of this, as much as 3. And I'll probably try to go for 10.5 because it's just going to work better. Now, because I'm cutting all that, this bar, which just is a slider, it works on the, this comes out of this. It's got a little gear-driven thing, and it pushes and pulls that. So in order for this to all line up, I'm going to have to cut about whatever this measurement is, 3 inches, out of this wire, make a new bend. And it's the funny thing is, it's laid in here, and it's actually pressed up into the switch. And then this has a spiral on it. This kind of spirals around the column. So I'm hoping I can still do all that because it's going to be that much shorter and it won't have that much flexibility anymore. Well, I'm going to try. And then finally, this piece here, that already slides. That's about where it lines up. I've drawn a line. Now, if I'm going to cut 3 inches out of this, I have to cut 3 inches out of this. And that's not going to hurt anything. This is just 3 inches shorter. I say that now, but we'll see how it goes. Inside, there's nothing keeping me. This is I think an aluminum or a stainless steel casting or forging. But there's nothing down here. There's nothing keeping me from cutting 3 inches out. This slot here, I think, is where the gear shift indicator used to be. Used to pull on a wire. Well, I can replicate that later, or I might do something different. Maybe just a pointer, I don't know. That's just fixed to this. So, that's the plan. Sheesh. Well, for better or for worse, if I can make this work, I save $800 to $1,000. If not, well, I don't. I've cut these pieces off and I'm just going to join them together. It's easy to do because it's actually seamed tubing. There's a seam here. I can just line up all these bits. And the upper tube and the lower tube are the same. That seam is lined up. And all I'm going to do is this final piece here. As for these collars, it's just offcuts. I cut about 1 inch long. I planned this to have in a ½ inch overlap on both sides. So I can do, I've drilled them, I'll have plug welds on them, and then just a tack weld here and there. Should be good. Okay, and then I'll just line this up so I can see the seam. Okay, that's my new steering column. Once I weld it up, put some spot welds in it. And then go to the next step. This is not the worst hack job I've ever done, but it's probably tied for first. That steering column is now 10.5 inches shorter. It is ugly. Happily, it'll be under the dash and won't be able to see it. I don't think there's going to be a problem with strength, just it hurts your eyes to look at it. This cam is in relation to this arm and a slot here. Don't know if you can see it on camera, but I've scribed a line here, center line all the way through. If I keep that lined up, we should be good. All it was is some plastic bits that were either extruded into this, I don't know how they did it, but there was plastic on both sides. And it went straight through, and that just locked it in place. So I got my line lined up. Did I get 10.5 inches? This shifting tube started at 27.5 inches long. So my target is 16 inches. I'm at 19 inches. Wonderful. So I'm going to have to take this tube out this way. This tube here, you can see the end of it here. It's actually, there's a neck down part here that it's hitting. So I need to cut some 3 inches off of that just to get it down far enough. This slot, I'll just cut a new slot here. So now I have to get this tube out and cut a bunch of it off. This is the part of the plastic that came out of there. This looks like it was just injected nylon or something. It's just a little recess there was holding it. There's a bit of plastic still in it. This piece came off the bottom of that right there. Actually like this. Anyways, I don't know if you can tell, but that's been expanded. So it's a tight fit into this piece. Well, now it's loose because it's smaller. I was just going to take the anvil here and I'm going to try to just swell that out a little bit, just make a little bit of a cone, just so it fits a little bit tighter. It's a pretty smooth fit. I can maybe get a little bit further. There's my line. So keep that line going. This has got to be 16 inches long overall, and it is perfect. Good grief. It was just a small gap here, so I had some baling wire, and there's the tail end of it. I'll just shove that in and that'll be good and centered. So there's the slot. It's the right length, 16 inches on the button, and my column over here. Okay, the final thing is the shaft. So the first video I ever reviewed on this was a long time back, and it was how to fix a problem with your tilt steering. Well, in his case, this little plastic thing here had gone bad, which goes in this kind of a yoke. Fits in there. And he said it was a real nightmare to get it apart. Ooh, I see there's some wear on this. That's not good. That wear is caused by these are little funky looking things, but there's a metal clip in there. And that metal clip has rubbed a slot. I will see if I can just put it in a different position so it doesn't line up there anymore. So where they used to be there, I'll just try to rearrange it so it's somewhere else. This actually just fell apart for me. I was goofing around with the shaft, putting it through, make sure everything's fit, and this just fell off. So I figured, well, it can't be that hard to put together. Yeah. It's kind of funky, but it does go together. Not that bad. This will be the second time I'm trying. Ah, just like that. Okay, and these little metal bits are rubbing in a different spot, so it should be like new. So that's the next thing to change shape anyway. I have to shorten this by 10.5 inches. I will probably work to pull this out. I know this has to come off a bit because it's not 10.5 inches from here to here. This flat area, cut 1.5 inches off of that. That's a shame. But that's just what it's going to have to be because this is going to hit up hard against there. That's for another day. It's 4 o'clock. It's 104 in here because I don't have an air conditioner. Plus I just work slow and there's things to do. This isn't the only thing I've been doing today in the shop. I've done other things. So it's been a productive day, but as far as this video goes, it's been a couple of weeks and I haven't really done a lot, just a little bit. Because another part of it is I pretty much tend to drag my feet. Rather than rush into something dumb, I prefer to think about it before I do something dumb. And so far, I've saved myself some time because I didn't do it wrong in the first place. I ended up thinking about it first. Thanks for watching. Thanks for staying with me. Give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe. I'll see you next time.